Good morning, everybody. We're going to start pretty soon, and Max Torres is going to be the first speaker. My name is Kurt Robinson, and I'm going to be your MC for this morning. And Maximiliano Torres is our first speaker. He's a young anarchist here from Mexico, here living in Puerto Vallarta, our own local anarchist to tell us about how to build a better society. So Max has been working with an intentional community or an eco-village here in Puerto Vallarta, or about an hour away, and he's going to tell us about why anarchism. That's his presentation. So go ahead, Max, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so my talk is going to be called Why Anarchism, and it's mostly about like why I'm an anarchist, or why I consider myself an anarchist, and why would anyone call themselves an anarchist too. So it all starts when I was learning about economics. I was trying to make sense of like the world, what capitalism is, what socialism is, and I remember myself watching a video, and it was like a panel or something, and they were debating about what freedom was and how it related to capitalism, and basically it was like a really shocking video to me, because they said something like this: if you defend freedom or liberty just because of their outcomes, then you're actually not defending liberty or freedom. And that was shocking to me, because up until that time, I was defending capitalism or the free market economy because, well, that has good outputs, right? Like it usually leads to more wealth, to prosperity, to better wages, to lower prices, which it all sounds really good now, right? So I was like, well, if I'm not supposed to defend freedom based on the outcomes, then how am I supposed to defend something? Like what's the deal here? So I think my view basically changed from utilitarianism to like a more ethical approach, thanks to that video, and also to reading some libertarian anarchists. And basically, I remember myself like reading a quote, which I don't remember like exactly, the phrasing, but they basically said that the government was the only institution that was allowed to acquire their income based on violence. Like we all in one way or another participate in the free market economy. We either offer a service or we sell something, and that is basically a voluntary interaction, right? If we want to sell our product or sell our services, then we have to make sure the other person will also benefit from this. And the only way for us to actually have an income is basically doing this. And that's for us, like that's pretty much 99% of the people, except for the government. Like, how does the government acquires money? Well, they basically use taxes, and taxes, they're not voluntary. They don't ask you to pay, and if you don't pay, then that's okay. No, like you have to pay them. If you don't pay for those things, then you're basically going to jail. And if you try to defend yourself as you would with any other people that will try to like steal from you, then you'll basically be killed by the state, right? So it was really shocking to me, like switching my point of view from an utilitarian perspective to an ethical one, because I was really used to think in utilitarian terms, and I think we all are at some extent. And then when I was faced with this reality that government is based on violence, I'm like, well, then like what? Then the state shouldn't exist at all, and then all the services that he provides, the roads, the healthcare system, education and stuff, then what are we supposed to do with those things? And I also read like a great quote, which I have to look at on my phone. This quote is by Bylund, I always get his name wrong. And he basically says, one sec. Your view that a centralized, coercive, or mandated solution to a problem is necessary means only one thing. That you think your inability to imagine peaceful solutions is a sufficient reason to subject everyone else at your will. And that's basically the premise for the existence of the government. Since we don't know how education would be, since we don't know how the healthcare system will work in a free society with voluntary interactions, then we must mandate this with violence through the government. And I think we can see the difference between the voluntary interaction, I guess, side of the world and the violence when it comes to, let's say, vaccines, for example. You can have the same argument or the same, I guess, position regarding vaccines that they shouldn't be mandatory. But you can have two different reasonings for this. You either come from an ethical perspective or from an utilitarian one. An ethical perspective will be, well, it's your body, so it's your choice, right? Like, you get to decide whether you want to take a vaccine or not. And that's basically it. That's the ethical side of the argument. But then you can defend the same point with an utilitarian perspective, which you would have to look at data, like the science, the scientific studies, and then you will be like, okay, maybe since the studies show that the risk is not justifiable, then you shouldn't take the vaccine, and thus it shouldn't be mandatory. But even though it's the same point that vaccines shouldn't be mandatory, if you come from an utilitarian perspective, then you really have to think about absolutely everything, and it's also subjective, because maybe some people will be like, okay, yeah, I mean, there is some risk with the vaccines, but I do want to take it. So this is also subjective, and you cannot just say that it shouldn't be mandatory just because you think it's not good for you. You should say it shouldn't be mandatory, but because it relies on ethics, because it's their body, so they have to decide on their body, I guess. And this applies for almost any political issue. So let's say education. We all know how bad the school system is, right? They don't usually teach what's most needed for most people. Basically, it's just pretty bad. We all know this. But it's not bad because there has to be a reform where you need to teach kids whatever they want, and you have to do this through the public school system. No, the problem is that it is mandatory, which means that if they are doing a bad job, then what happens? Since they acquire their income through taxes, and it's through force, then they don't have to provide a good service, because either they can do a great job or a bad job, and it's going to be the same for them, because they are still getting their wages. They are still getting the income, because it's based on violence. So they don't actually have to give a good service. And this is the case for education. This is the case for healthcare. This is the case for even roads. This is the case for absolutely anything. So you can apply this even to really difficult political issues such as immigration, for example. Immigration, ideally, in an anarchist society, the only border is private property, which means that if you wanna invite someone else from, let's say, Mexico or the US or China or whatever, then you can do it as far as it's on your property, right? But then what we have right now with the current political situation is either you have open borders or you have some kind of control. And why is this? Because there's a state, and those there are public spaces, and then the state has to be this arbitrary centralized power which gets to decide if somebody can move or not based on what? Based on absolutely nothing. So the anarchist position is an utilitarian too. It's utilitarian at some extent, because it really helps solving a lot of problems, in my opinion, but it is mostly an ethical position. So imagine if you were to research on absolutely every single issue there's on the world. So let's say on economics, on the banking system, on the vaccines, or the healthcare. How much money you as a government have to invest, so to speak, in a service or in, and like I guess vaccines for influenza or something, there's really not an answer because you are getting the money through taxation, which is through force, through the use of violence. So you can just put out like huge number, and it won't mean anything because you are not getting the information from the voluntary market. So people are not actually saying, I need vaccines for this, I need roads for this, I need schools for this. They are not saying this. Like, with what happens with enterprises is they have to solve a problem in order to exist. If they don't solve a problem, if they are not useful to society, then they just, go bankrupt pretty much. And this doesn't happen with governments again. Why? Because they are based on violence. So usually, in those freedom circles, almost everyone comes here because they see some kind of problem in society. So they believe that the government is corrupt enough so that, you kind of have to step away from it and just focus on solutions. But a lot of things, we really focus on how corrupt the government or how bad something is. And we don't really see the whole picture, I believe, which is that the government relies on, as I said, violence, right? And, like a lot of times, we all have this kind of questions, such as, okay, but if the government didn't exist, then what would we do with roads or education, blah, 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 blah. And first of all, we have to realize that, yeah, we do kind of like need some kind of answer, for sure. But that's not the fact that you don't have a clear answer, it does not justify violence, right? So if we do not, if I, for example, I didn't know how to, let's say, raise my children, so to speak, that doesn't justify me to coerce teachers to teach my children, right? Like, that's not a justified action by any means. So basically, this is the same thing for the government as a whole. Just because you don't have a clear answer, it doesn't mean that the government should exist, because again, it relies on violence. So what I also learned in economics is that the future is uncertain, which means that we don't know what the future will look like. So although we might have some idea on education, on healthcare, on whatever topic you want to discuss, like, no one has a clear answer. And usually what the governments do is they tell you they have some kind of like security, they offer you security instead of liberty. So they say, well, we're gonna create this amount of schools and blah, blah, blah. And people usually are like, they are comfortable with this because they can see like a clear answer. But in reality, how the market works is that an entrepreneur can set up a business, can set up a few schools even. But the problem is, if they are not, like, if they're a business, they have to make money because they have to serve the client. And if they don't serve the client, then the businesses will close. So if you look at the market system, it is really flexible. It is really flexible because you can create a business, but if it doesn't actually work, then it just don't work, and that's it. And you have to find another solution to solve this problem. So the market has flexibility. And the governments, they usually say, oh, we're gonna do this. And because they don't have the information of voluntary interactions, of people telling them with money, yes, I do like your service, I do like this good. Since they don't have that kind of information, because they, again, rely on violence, then they offer a solution, they offer a service, whatever, but we know it's not really efficient at all. So, again, like, we can theorize about how the healthcare system would look like. We can theorize about how every service will look like in a free market, but we can just theorize about it because it's information of the future. We don't have that kind of information. Imagine if there was people asking you, how would transportation look like under the free market system when the car was invented? Like, no one could have predicted that there would be cars, there would be planes. Why? Why is that? Because that's information of the future. We don't have that information. But because we know there are people who are entrepreneurs who have creativity and who can solve problems, then we know that the future is not just, like a kind of dark matter that we don't have any information on. we know people are creative. We know people like creating businesses too, and we can help each other. And since we know this is true for like for most people, then we actually have an answer on how things could be. How will the school system will look like? Well, maybe for some people, it will be more like a homeschool situation. For some other people, it could be hiring a teacher every week or every month to teach them different topics. We have all these answers that work for every single individual, and what differs from the government is that they offer a coercive mandated solution to everyone, right? So I think this is why I came to anarchism in general, because I was really looking for an ethical perspective on things. Because I was already tired of reading about economics and how the Fed works, the Federal Reserve, how they print money and blah 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 blah. And then if you go to a university, to the, let's say, economic department, they have a lot of books. They have a lot of books on math and a lot of topics that it will look like it's really complicated. And if you wanted to talk about economics or about health or whatever, then you really have to be like a big expert on all those issues. And the reality with politics is that you can rely on ethics, basically. You don't have to be a health expert in order to decide if mandatory vaccines are good or not. You just have to rely on ethics. It's as simple as this. This is also the case for, let's say, I don't know, like government money, for example. Like, do you have to have a master's degree in economics to understand that the government shouldn't create money? No, you can just rely on ethics. Like, who are they and why are they imposing us the dollars or the Mexican pesos or whatever? Why can't we decide freely with, gold, silver, crypto even, to have a voluntary system that actually works? So I think that was the main reason I came to anarchism. Like the shift from utilitarian perspective to voluntary. I think I was really needing that because I was just getting like kind of stressed even learning about all those topics and how the government is doing this wrong and how they tell everyone that they should do this, but actually economically speaking they shouldn't because it's ineffective, blah 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 blah. But this is not needed. And actually most of us, we don't have enough time to be researching about all those topics and about politics. We can just rely on violence. I mean, on ethics. And now that I made that mistake, actually violence is the easy way out, to solve problems. If you wanted to adopt the government, perspective, you can just see everything on the society and be like, oh, then I guess we should mandate this and this and this and this from the government, like from the state perspective. And that's actually the easy way out. Also one of the things why I consider myself an anarchist is because realizing that the government shouldn't do a lot of things make you be more responsible with your own choices, right? Because if you don't have, if you don't trust in a mandatory solution that involves violence, then it's like, okay, how am I gonna solve the problems that, let's say, the government is making? Like, should I create a school? Should I start a business of, like self-defense or, security, privacy, whatever? There's a lot of things that we as individuals can do in order to make a better society. And I feel like shifting from an utilitarian perspective to an ethical one make you not only become like an anarchist, because if we just apply the ethical principle to absolutely everything in politics, it is kind of like clear to me that the government shouldn't exist because it involves violence. But also, like, it makes you like really, really, really conscious of like your actions and the time you spend every single day. Because like, okay, the government and all these, big businesses, whatever, they basically spend their whole time, every single day trying to make some new policy, trying to, some people even like solve some problems, although they are really making it all worse. And there's like so many millions of dollars into those companies, into those governments, and what am I doing? Like, what am I like? Am I really helping? Like, does it help if I just know this and I don't do absolutely anything? So I think that's also one of the reasons why I believe more people should become anarchists. So, just they don't have to, like, first of all, rely on researching on every single topic. They can literally just rely on ethical views, and that's how they know if like some politic is good or not. If like some policy, sorry, and also because it gives you more empowerment, I believe. And it is it's ironic because even though you must have some kind of an answer to everything, like you can read, there are so many books on security and how a defense system will work in an anarchist society and stuff. You can always read those things, but if you first know that like it all has to be based on peaceful interactions, then your view just changes, and now you're researching on things because you want to provide a solution, because you want to make sense of the world, not because you're just trying to see, oh, is this position good or not, because in most cases a scenario, if you just research all day about politics, that's really not going to help at all. You can have the answers, but if the ultimate choice is based on politics, then you just don't have control, right? Like it's all on their side. Like they have the power, and maybe I know this party is less worse than the other, but does that really help you in something? Just knowing this. And it also involves voting, for example. Like voting, we usually hear that voting is important because it's how we I guess contribute to politics, whatever. But really, how the free market system works is you vote with every single thing you buy, with every service you provide or you sell, or you buy. Then you're putting a vote on this business, you're putting a vote on this person because they are doing a great job at doing some specific stuff. And again, this doesn't happen with government. With government, you don't really have a way to put a profit on you researching about this candidate and the other, and that's why so many people just don't even bother looking at politics, because it provides absolutely no outcome direct to their lives. And this is not the case, I believe, with anarchism. If you want to make sense of how the education system works, it's not because you want to vote and somehow with just one vote change the system. It's because you want to either understand the world or solve a problem. And I think this shift is extremely important, especially to to most of the people, because they usually see politics or this side of the spectrum as something external to them. And that's even the case with Mexicans. Most Mexicans know that politics is something out of their hands. So that's why so many Mexicans, they don't even know that much about politics. They know that every single party is corrupt, that they are bad, and that's all they know. Because I'm Mexicans, as Mexicans especially, this is not a first world country, so we don't have as much time to spend researching about this thing and blah 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 blah. Most Mexicans need to just basically work and provide an income for their family, so they don't have all this time to to spend learning about politics. And this is, I believe, where anarchism comes in, because if we just come from an utilitarian perspective, we're not going to convince people of adopting an ethical position, of supporting freedom, if they have to know absolutely every single outcome of the healthcare system, of the education system. But if they rely on an ethical position, then they can understand that, okay, yeah, I mean, violence is bad, I guess, so that's why the government shouldn't use violence against me. And it is really as simple as this. And we usually overcomplicate it, and the government usually overcomplicate this process because they don't wanna use seeing how the actual system works, you know. So I also believe that if we really want to change, not only we have to work and not only we have to make entrepreneurial decisions to help the society in general, but we also have to spread the word in easy terms. And what better, easier way than with anarchism? Thank you so much.
Step through the pool.